that I don't. If there's a question that I can't quite get to, I will follow up. I'd rather say I don't know and be honest and look into it than give you factually inaccurate information. So um, I did receive some of the questions in advance, so I feel like I've got a pretty good idea of how to answer most of them. But please go ahead.
So maybe there's two questions, maybe three questions in here about sort of overall vision. Um, so those are, can you share what you've learned from other school districts? Do they have similarly long wait lists, staffing challenges, and what's their fee structure compared to ours?
Great question. So I have been in collaboration with a number of expanded learning managers from across Alameda County, as well as the ACOE Director of Expanded Learning. That's the Alameda County Office of Education. There are a number of different models that districts use. Some have district employees, quite a few go entirely third-party vendors for a number of reasons. And what I'm learning is that there are some similar constraints with enrollment as it relates to really getting to that high ceiling of our student teacher ratio, and that being a really hard cap, and that especially with the TK and K being at 10-1, districts that have issues with wait lists seem to have it most acutely at the TK and K level. And then there's also some differences in how enrollment is structured. Uh, One model that I feel is worth considering implementing in Berkeley is to essentially do the vast majority of the enrollment in the spring,
We would love that.
with the understanding that we're going to enroll as close to 100% of the students as we can, but understanding that given staffing and given these ratios, it's important that we reach out to families for whom we won't eventually be able to provide a space for as early as possible. And so in
Yeah.
many districts, they tell their families in June so that that family then has the rest of the summer to find alternative accommodations. And I feel like as a family, as a parent in this district, leaving families stranded with a week to go before the school year started, to me was not an acceptable outcome going forward. So we are definitely committed to shifting that.
Great. Um, let's see. Um, Another question that's sort of more overall vision, would the district consider expanding the role of the extended learning staff to also act as information clearinghouse or even possible coordinator to be able to refer caregivers to a third party with BUSD transportation? And if so, and I think some of that already does happen. Like I know there is transportation to other sites. And actually, I was on the 2x2 meeting on Friday, and they talked about an increase, expanding their offerings by 100 spots, which sounded good at first. And then I realized, like, if we're just talking elementary school, that's like less than 10 kids per school. But still, like 100 spots is still 100 spots of people that are on a wait list. But so, is that something that's, I mean, I guess, again, the answer I think to this is that, yes, it's already happening, but is there more of that kind of working navigation between different sites and navigation between different after school programs? Is that something that you feel is part of the scope expanding into that more?
Yes, and it does seem to be a model that other districts have employed as well, knowing full well that they're not going to be able to enroll everyone. So they, in advance, proactively have sought out partnerships with the cities that they're in. And while we wouldn't be able to guarantee enrollment in a City of Berkeley program, we'd be able to offer that information and a pathway, and even have developed some sort of relationship with some of those programs so that we can tell them, hey, we anticipate we're going to have X number of students coming your way seeking support. Here's their age levels, etc. As it relates to transportation, that is outside of my purview, but we are always in collaboration with other departments in our district to try to maximize our serving of our families and the community.
Great. Now, there's a whole slew of questions about staffing, and shortfalls in staff. And again, I know this comes back to you've been doing this for 6 weeks, and these staffing decisions were made back in April or March. So, and I know, I mean, I've learned just a little bit about how, if you can't guarantee a position, you have to pink slip a position and all of this. But um, moving forward, what are changes that you're considering to address shortfalls in care and, how this whole process happens where like there were plenty of people that were let go from the after school programs back in the spring, and now we find ourselves with a staffing shortfall.
So I've been in close collaboration with Human Resources to receive our most recent eligibility list. So the way that it works on the classified side is that there's an initial screening process, and then we receive an eligibility list. I have reached out to all 14 names that were provided to me, and I've already begun the interview process with a few, and we have several more lined up for this week. I am hopeful. We, as our department, does not directly hire. We fill out what is called a PAF and then pass it back to HR to ask them to expedite that process. My hope is that we will be hiring many new ITs in the near future.
There's a question on here about fast tracking hires, um, and what the superintendent is able to do in terms of facilitating this to solve this issue, if anything.
So I guess, I mean, I'm not sure if I would call it, I don't want to characterize it as fast tracking because we do still need to do our due diligence and make sure that we're hiring qualified candidates who are going to serve our children well. Um, but the fact that we received 14 names as opposed to the usual three, I feel like was a step in that direction. Um, and so that if we could say hire even half that number, I've already had a few tell me, oh, I've already moved on, or I'm living in LA now, whatever the case may
Sure.
be.
Yeah.
Um, but if we were to hire, say, 7 of them and then get a new list of people off the eligibility list and continue in that, at that pace, we would be able to close our vacancy crisis within a couple of months.
This next question's not on here, but like I know that part of this issue had to do with the, needing to cut 7 million from our budget last year, and I know they need to cut another 2 million from the general fund this year. So is that part of what's affecting this? And is there a way to keep that from affecting the after school programs?
The vacancy issue going back to last year is not due to the budget.
Okay,
What I will say in total transparency is that some of the looming budgetary concerns very well
maybe.
may.
Okay.
And so as we've inherited this hiring crisis, we're going to need to navigate it carefully. We're going to need to prioritize hiring frontline staff who are providing direct service. The program is rather top heavy at the moment, and we
Can
need to
you give
balance
a
that.
little, when you say that, can you give a little, like, what is the current, I mean, I don't expect an org chart here, but like, what is this current organization? What is the top heaviness? Where is that coming from?
So not to get too deep into it, but we have two distinct after-school programs, Bears and Learns. So when I say top heavy, I'm referring more to the Learn side. There are 16 total employees who are not. I mean, they work with kids every single day. I want to be really careful about how I'm saying this, and they're working really, really hard to serve our students. But in terms of like evaluating ratio and how many students we can enroll, they're not really currently counted on ratio. Um, and so yeah, a total of 16 is quite a bit. So we're looking to
So is that
hire
one per site?
roughly. And there's another question about that.
Yes, there
We're
is, about how there's only 3 schools without a coordinator and why those positions haven't been filled and filled with the program specialists that are on the eligibility list.
Yeah, so that's an ongoing conversation, and there's a lot of different implications, and where I am working in concert with other district leaders to make those decisions thoughtfully and wisely so that they are sustainable for the long term.
Gotcha. So you said there's like six, and I might get the numbers wrong. You said there's 16 that are sort of like more administrative. And then how many people are underneath them? Like, is it about like how many people report up to that? Like,
Right. So if we're counting, I mean, I'd have to get the exact number to you, but if we're counting third-party providers, all told, we're looking at about 75, 80 total right now.
okay, so per person, that's what someone else who's better at math than this would figure that out real fast, but that's not me. But okay, so that gives us an idea though, maybe
It's about a 5-to-1 ratio.
5 to 1. Okay. Um, let's see. I'm just going to start moving through some of these that I don't know quite how they fit in, but questions about paying living wage for staff members. You know, cost of living in the East Bay is like crazy town. And how, you know, is there anything on the horizon? There's a flip side to this question, which was higher up, which is, have you considered reviewing the fee structure to be able to increase pay?
So that's a good question. And that's sort of, I would like to separate those into two kind of distinct things because they're not necessarily directly connected. Raising pay is based on negotiations with the union and the district, whereas raising fees would be something that we would make at a departmental level. Fees have, as far as I know, fees have not been raised in quite some time. Um, I think that I think it's definitely something that is on our radar and under consideration.
Okay, but it's again, it sounds like it's sort of two separate arms at play in terms of raising fees versus paying more. Paying more would be a negotiation between, as a contract negotiation with the union.
Correct. And salary schedules are more or less determined. Well, so the salary schedules are negotiated with the union and they're also set. The salary ranges are set by the personnel commission on the classified side.
Okay, if I don't know what that is, can you give me like a one sentence? What's the personnel commission? Is that the city of Berkeley? Or is that
So yeah, technically it is not a BUSD entity.
okay?
And you know what? I would rather than try to give you my spitball answer, I would rather
Okay,
try to get a real clear definition of just what our personnel commission does and how it impacts us.
okay.
Can give you a 2-second description if you want, Rita.
That would be awesome. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, it actually predates the organizing or the organization of the BCCE. And so it was put into place by statute, basically to provide workers' protections. And so it's a panel of 3, one that is selected by the district, one selected by the staff, and then one's a joint. And they have their own, they're independent, and they make decisions about hiring and job classifications and salary ranges and all that stuff. And Scott put a very handy link in the chat, so that will help too. The idea behind personnel commissions was that there couldn't be nepotism. So it, you know, that jobs would be open and would be selected based on fairness and qualification and not that you're friends with somebody.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's to make sure that everyone, you don't just go around hiring all your siblings.
Gotcha. So there's 2 questions on in here that I think both speak to enrichment budgets. One question, and what is the enrichment vendor budget this year for Learns and Bears programs? In the past, it was $7,000.
That's specific to the Learn side. The Bears is structured a little bit differently.
I see.
Learns, the number has traditionally been around $7,000-8,000. It is determined a little bit site by site. For example, a program like King is going to have a higher total need than say a site that enrolls half the number of students. But in a year, in an era with a shrinking budget, there's going to be a haircut for sure.
Okay. And another budget question, why did the supplies fund decrease this year from 700 to 500?
So we decided to start at 500 and evaluate where we were at budget wise as we get further into the year. And if Learn's coordinators and specialists are coming to us saying this isn't enough, we're going to look to make sure that they have the funds that they need. We're trying to play it close, wanting to make sure that we're existing in the reality that we're in
Okay,
with the budget.
gotcha. And again, with sort of like the looming general fund cuts as a part of that, or?
I can only speak to the budget we control. One thing that's unique about expanded learning is that we have our, not, I don't want to say we have our own budget, but we do have a pretty significant amount that we are kind of in control of through ELOP and ACEs. And it's really important that we are using those funds responsibly. And so we're initially playing it close. And if we get to say close to the winter and we see that we're going to need to allocate some more, we'll do that.
Okay. So this one is a very specific PTA thing. And this used to be something that was more broad across elementary schools, but some schools are still providing PTA enrichment programs for aftercare. What is the district's thinking around this? You know, I don't know, similarly, actually, I know that the coordination around doing those PTA enrichment classes after school has gotten markedly more challenging. So I think that's why fewer of our elementary schools are doing that. But what is your take on all of that? Well, what's the district's take on all of that?
On the status of PTA enrichments?
Yeah, and sort of on, is that something that, I mean, it certainly isn't something the district sort of prioritizes. I almost feel like, and yeah, I almost feel like it's something that they look the other way on more than anything. Like they definitely now have more structure to how they need to happen and, the processes around them. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like that's something that's encouraged, as schools trying to put these things together.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm happy to continue to collaborate with the PTA to identify best practices and find the sites where PTA enrichments are operating smoothly and working well and trying to copy those practices at other sites. Granted, it does take, and then there's on the other side, it's a two-way street. We've got to make sure that we've got the PTA members at those given sites that want to take that on, right?
Sure.
It's something that it is a pretty significant undertaking. One thing I want to go back to that I didn't mention related to the budget. So
Yes.
I want to give more of a clear answer on that. So a really significant piece of the budget that is kind of going away is that we've been receiving significant funding due to COVID, and that's going away this fall, which really changes things a lot. Also, the funding formula is changing. In the past, our programs were funded based on, and this is coming from my budget analyst, so I feel confident quoting him on this. Our budget in previous years for expanded learning was on the Bears side specifically was funded based on need, whereas now it's going to be funded based on attendance. And so these two shifts that are changing are going. So we are going to see some of this one-time or short-term funding going away, and we're going to have to come up with some accommodations to that. So I just wanted to highlight, because that is a very important piece, and I didn't want to leave that out there.
But then the other component of that you were saying though, is that it's
So in the
sorry.
past, we were, so what we were, the way we were receiving funding was based on, it was based on how many staff we had and based
Right.
on the number, like essentially based on if attendance were essentially 100%.
So,
Whereas
so
now,
when you
now the
say
funding
now
is going to
based
be,
on attendance, does that mean that if somebody's maybe enrolled but not going, that their spot might be able to be used by somebody else?
not actually, unfortunately, no, not in Bears. There's actually some really clear
Yeah.
parameters around that. What it means is that if a child's not going, we're losing money, whereas before we were not.
Oh,
Or if we have, or if there's a class that has fewer than a certain threshold of students, which none of them do at the moment.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a hand. Other people might have been raising their hand and I didn't see it, but Anna, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that's really important actually, because I want to understand where was that decision made? Was that a BUSD decision around the formula? Is that something that came down from the state? Because that's like a really crippling,
Yeah,
you know,
it is big.
change.
Yeah, that is quite large. No, it was not a district decision. It's definitely coming from the state. It's a state funding formula.
It was mostly that way before COVID. Most funding is predicated on that. Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Correct.
Gosh, guys, I'm just now looking. So I was not keeping track of the chat here as I was going through. Please do raise hands as we go, and I think I'll be able to see those a little easier here. Going back to our list. Then there's a question about what changes are coming in order to address the shortfall in availability for after school. And it's not, you've been talking about this more specifically, but maybe broadly speaking. So really it's about hiring right now, it sounds like. And it's getting those positions filled.
That's right.
Okay. And then I think it was somebody put in the chat why it was that after school staff were let go in the spring only to be short staffed and have wait lists for after school care in the fall. Here's a question. Why is expanded learning paying so much for Elevo instead of hiring ITs that are applying? Elevo is one of the contractors, right?
Correct. So our Levo contract was originally drawn up as a way to provide enrichment to our after-school programs. It has since become a stopgap for filling in the vacancies, which we are now actively seeking to fill. As
Okay.
we continue to hire ITs, we will be looking to start to draw down on the contract with Elevo.
So then it
And
returns to the idea of enrichment. Is that the
correct. And also too, it just going forward, we would be able to spend less on our contract with Elevo.
okay? I guess this next question is why aren't IT applicants on the eligibility list being hired if so many sites are short-staffed? Many applied in January. And again, there was, yeah. So is there specifics around, I mean, like,
So when I look at the eligibility list that I was provided, all the applicants that I was given from HR applied between May and August of 2024.
okay, so they're more recent applicants.
Correct.
I know that you've been meeting with some of our PTA members, and that's a working group that's been going on for several years now. Are there any plans to change that collaborative into a more formal district advisory committee? I know there's district advisory committees for lots of other things. Is that something, I mean, I'm not even sure that that's something within that you'd have the answer to, but it's certainly something that I think we'd be interested in.
I'm not sure what the process would be to doing that. I'm not sure what the difference between the current setup would be and something new, if it's just formalizing it. But if that's, I can't really speak to it. I'm not sure what the process would be, but it's not something I'm opposed to.
Cool. Okay, everyone, I think I got all the things on our spreadsheet. Do people have, I mean, we've got some time here. If people want to either come off of mute and continue this discussion here, or if there's questions to go into the chat. Yusuf, that was awesome. I can't believe we got through all those questions. I feel like we did a great job there. You specifically, and I was cheerleading the whole way. But are there people here who'd like to jump in with more questions around this? I know we have almost 20 people here tonight, so.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Hi, James. We were asking if anybody has questions for Yusuf about after school Bears Learns. We went through all the spreadsheet questions, and I was just asking if people have more to ask or any more. I mean, I guess let's see, we've got one in the chat actually. You've spoken so specifically about things. Do you have, what's your hopes for the future of our programming here in terms of Bears and Learns? Like if you could see down the road a few years, what are you hoping?
I would love, first and foremost, the piece that's on my mind is the enrollment piece. I would love to see a system where we have enrollment wrapping up by the end of the school year, and that the vast majority of our applicants are accepted. I do want to give the information. We had just over 2,000 applicants to the program. We have roughly 1,800 enrolled. So it's about 90%. That doesn't provide solace to the 10% who are not in. We still have a wait list of a couple hundred students, and I really empathize with those families. We're two working parents as well, and that after school care is absolutely essential. So I want to be able to inform families much earlier in the process so that if they're not going to have a placement, they have ample time to find an alternative solution. But meanwhile, continue to hire as many ITs as we can so that we can expand service.
Fantastic. And Anna asks, how can this council support you in your work?
I really appreciate that. One way that I already feel very supported by a number of people on this council is I've already met with several of them, and they've shared, they've helped me. I understand the current context and current facts on the ground. I also, knowing that we're going to be meeting on a monthly basis allows me to kind of keep the PTA at the forefront of my mind because, I'm a PTA member myself, and I want to make sure that we're being responsive to families. And yeah, so the continued dialogue would be really supportive, and the meeting with the collaborative on a monthly basis will definitely help. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, so if nobody else has more questions for you, then I will probably be reaching out again, maybe in June, for us to sort of talk about where things stand in terms of those goals, and I think we're all on the same page as to our hopes for what happens next as well. And so thank you so much for joining us tonight. Okay, last questions, anybody?
Rita, this is Kelly from Sylvia Mendez. Hi, I just don't see a raise the hand option, so I'm just jumping in.
Gosh, folks, jump in.
Just two quick comments. One is that there used to be programs like Gear Up and other wraparound service programs, and or a mishmash of community partnerships that we used to apply for grants for. And that we may need to think about a grant writing team here for that reason. As Yusuf mentioned, that funding is going away. So we used to fill that gap with grants, some grants. So I'm wondering if that's a possibility for this council. And then also, shoot, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, I'll stop there.
Well, you said grants, and anytime anyone says grant, I always think about how there's at UC Berkeley, the Chancellor's Community Partnership Fund. And I'm going to put that in the chat because I always feel like that's something that our PTAs could be taking more advantage of. Yeah, I mean, and that might be a conversation for the partnership, the PTA working group partnership for after school as well.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking it might sit. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. I would love some grant writing support. That would be fantastic.
I have a question.
Everyone,
This is
everyone.
Mara from BAM in Longfellow. What are the ELOP funds going to be used for this year for like enrichment across the board, maybe specifically elementary schools? And are they up to each site to decide?
So ELOP funds are like by state mandate, they're entirely meant for enrichments.
Is that the
Yes.
7,000 you were talking about before? Or is that different?
Yeah, so that's part of it. That's one way that the ELOP funds are used. It's also another it's also another area of constraint for us. Our ELOP funds in the 22-23 school year were 2.7 million. They are now 2.1 million this year. That's based largely on the percentage of unduplicated students. So that would be students who are free and reduced lunch qualifying, students who are English multilingual learners, and also who fit into other demographic qualifications. That's another plug to really have families fill out those free and reduced lunch forms. The higher that number is, the more funding we get, simply put. The ELOP funds are broadly used to pay for enrichments. And so the 7,000 per site, for example, is one way that those funds are used.
And so does each site then decide how it gets spent?
Yeah, in consultation with us, we do. I mean, but more or less, I have a lot of respect for the coordinators and specialists at our sites, and if they come to me with a really great idea that they want to enrich their program with, I'm generally, once we see the game plan, I'm likely to approve.
Gotcha. Mara, was there more you wanted to check in on or ask about with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think at our school, BAM, we so far don't have the $7,000, and I've been putting a lot of stress on our after school program, and our after school teachers are trying to do their own enrollment, and they're basically paying for it out of their own pockets and not having, like prep time to create the lessons, and they're kind of scrapping it together. And so I don't know if maybe someone can reach out to them and say, hey, give us the game plan that you have, and we'll get you the funds for it, because it it feels like it's pretty taxing on those teachers. And I just also wanted to kind of make a plug. I feel like when we're talking about these teachers as a kind of like a number, a ratio, 10-1, I just want to say that at least at our school, the after school program is, the before and after school, they're like the first people that so many families see, the only people that they interface with in the morning, and then the only people that they interface with really every day after school. And I think about when my 5th grader graduated a couple years ago, and in the graduation, I say like the most meaningful comments that kids made about their teachers were about the after school staff. So just to leave it there, they're really important in our district.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Mara, and I will reach out to the team at BAM. They do have access to those funds. There's a process by which they identify the enrichment or the enrichments that they want to do, and then they come to me with the price, and they fill out a requisition, and then we go through it and process it. So I will follow up with them to make sure that they're aware of the process, and they do have the funds available just as all the other sites. So thank you for
Awesome.
highlighting that. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And
thanks
I
so
agree.
much.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely essential.
And Vicky, you've got your hand up.
I do. Are we asking questions?
Yes.
Okay, for some reason I can't find the electric hand raising thing. I apologize for being late. So if this was asked or discussed, I apologize. Yusuf, am I correct that you oversee both Bears and Learns? Is that correct? Okay. So I also coordinate PTA after school programs at our site and have been registering students in after school programs. And I typically give Bears kids scholarships to our program and work with our Bears teachers. And I noticed that there was only 5 kindergarten Bears students in our program. And I talked to the coordinator and she said there's like over 20 people on the wait list and that she was told by the admin staff in the office that it takes 3 to 4 hours to process one student. And so my question is if there is a long wait list, why is it taking so long to process students on the wait list? And rather than leaving parents without childcare, can't the district hire like temp staff for 2 or 3 weeks and get through all of that paperwork so parents aren't waiting 2 or 3 weeks on a wait list when there's openings in the program?
Just to clarify, which side are you at, Vicky?
Malcolm X.
Okay, so with on the Bear side, you mentioned Bears. So Bears, the enrollment is not done grade by grade. It's the grades are combined.
Okay.
And so the number of students in kindergarten at Malcolm X is only one of the grades that Devia serves. So that
Okay.
she's serving students in grades TK through second.
Right.
And so if she has 5 in TK and 5 in K and roughly 5 in first and second, then that brings her up to her max. And because because she does have T-kinders and kinders, her aide that's in her room, that brings them to a total of 20 total students available because it's a 10-to-1 ratio the moment you have a single T-kinder in the class.
I see. So the moment there is a TK or Kinder in there, even though there's only 5 total for TK Kinder, it's 1 to 10 for the whole group. And because she has more first and second graders, then those other kindergarten parents have to stay on the wait list because of there not being enough staff in there. Is that correct? What I heard?
So on the Bears side, Bears is fully staffed at Malcolm X. They have a Bears teacher and a Bears aide. Um, that is fully staffed for Bears.
Right.
It's
And so the most students that they can take is 20, but that's not just in TK kindergarten, that's through second grade.
that's correct.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah,
So those 20 some odd kids on the wait list are never going to get a spot then, unless we were to somehow expand the program.
the program that would be more likely to be expanded at your site would be to hire additional Learns ITs and try to get them into the Learns program.
Okay, but even though there are families that qualify for Bears and that are on a Bears wait list, we wouldn't consider expanding that program? Because we don't have a lot of room to have another TK Kinder. Um, uh, for example, we already have 2 kindergartners and a TK for Learns. We already have 3 Learns classrooms, but I know there's a lot of kinders on the Bears wait list, and I didn't realize that those counted as the same numbers for all through second grade.
Yeah, so Malcolm X is one of 2 sites that has 2 Bears teachers.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, that is something that I think theoretically could happen down the road to hire a
I
third
see.
Bears teacher,
Okay.
but
So, but anyone on the wait list now is not waiting to be processed. They're just not going to get a spot because you're saying it's full because there are 20 kids when you add in the first and second graders, correct?
that is correct. And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't
And I
I
feel
mean
for those families.
yeah, no, it's been
Yeah.
about a week and a half since I talked to her, so I apologize if maybe there's been conversation since then. But when I was checking in with her about 2 weeks ago, she was saying that there's a big wait list, and her understanding was it was a processing thing that was preventing it from increasing. So I will check in with her again. But yeah, I don't know if we discussed in general the shortage. Um, and if you had proposed some solutions or things that we can do to expand these programs to help parents get on wait lists. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but I enrolled several kids into after school programs, and particularly TK kindergartners in the PTA classes. And then they got into a Willard program and then all had to drop out because they couldn't take the big kid bus to the Willard program after their enrichment class, and then I had to refund like 6 or 7 families who got into that after school program because they needed the childcare, but they weren't able to take the separate bus. So there's a lot of moving parts, I guess.
Yeah, Vicky, I can answer that initial question though, which you asked. It did come up earlier in the meeting. We have received 14 names from the eligibility list from Human Resources, and I have reached out to all of them. I've already interviewed a few, and we have interviews scheduled for the rest of this week. And
Okay.
my goal is to hire as many of them as I can. Also, as it relates to the roster for Bears at Malcolm X, I will follow up as well and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vicky. I appreciate it.
Yusuf, thank you for staying so long with us tonight. This has been really a great discussion and we really appreciate it. And like I said, I'll reach out to you again probably for our last meeting, which actually I was wrong. It's not June, it's the last Monday in May. So I'll check in with you then to see how things are going then, okay?
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me and I appreciate your advocacy for our students.
Absolutely, thank you. All righty. So next up tonight, we have Duffy Ross, who is coming to us from Berkeley Public Schools Fund. And let's see, I'm trying to think of how best, you sent us a sort of a statement that I read out at the last PTA council meeting. I don't know if you want to give just a little like blurb
Yeah,
before you get
I
rolling.
thought that in general, I find that a lot of people are still a little bit confused about who we are and what we do. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time on that. I thought I might give you a quick tour through our website to end with a sort of focus on a couple of the places where we either overlap with or collaborate with PTA council and PTAs, or some of this kind of questions that often come up from sort of what is the distinction between. And then I'm happy to take any questions. How about that?
Sounds great.
Okay. So just by way of introduction, the Berkeley Public Schools Fund is a separate nonprofit organization. We've been around for 42 years, and we actually came from parents. We came from parents organizing, not unlike PTAs. It was shortly after Prop 13 passed in California. So those of you who know the history of that tax reform initiative and how it devastated public education budgets in the state of California. And up and down the state at that time, parents got together and started to organize and say, we can't let this happen to public education. What are we going to do about it? In our situation in Berkeley, it was parents organizing out of a living room. They were a team of volunteers for 17 years operating out of a living room. And then they slowly professionalized. They got 1 paid staff member, and then they got a little closet in a district office. And then there was 2 paid staff. And at a certain point, the district asked them to take on a volunteer role, coordination role. So we've grown organically over time. And we're now a team of, I guess, FTE, we're about 6.5 people, but we're 9 people because a bunch of our folks are part-time. And we do kind of 3 main programs and a service. So I'll just mention those briefly, and then I can go into more depth. We give grants to educator teams. We have a number of volunteer programs, and we most recently added on a component where we directly service. We offer STEM programs in a lot of the out of school time, so weekends, summers, after school. And we do those in partnership with the district. And then supporting a kind of capacity building service that we provide is that we are fiscal sponsors. If you're familiar with that term, we essentially are a conduit. We're like a business conduit for funds that come into the district, and we hold those funds for the benefit of the larger district. So we hold probably 30 or 40 different funds for projects from preschool all the way to the high school. And generally those are projects that, like for example, we hold a climate literacy fund for Berkeley High. A teacher went out and got this great grant and she got all this money and she was like, what do I do with it? I can't put it in my personal bank account. So, oh, I can give it to the Berkeley Public Schools Fund. They'll hold it for me. So we essentially perform like the HR function for her project and enable it so that she doesn't have to go start a nonprofit. So that's a thumbnail of who we are and what we do. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I think we have to give me permission. Still don't see it. You're muted.
Do we need to change permissions for,
Sorry.
can we change permissions so that Duffy can be a host to be able to share? I don't think I'm able to do that. I was just looking.
Sorry.
While we're waiting, if anyone has any specific questions that you want to throw in the chat, I'd also be happy to answer those.
Okay. Try to share screens now.
Okay. You got it. Thank you. Okay. All right, so this is our homepage. And actually, I didn't mention our mission. This is probably important. We, for 30 some odd years, were just existed generally as a support to the whole district, sort of for anything and everything. And we, before the pandemic, started to look at the implications for specifically our grant making, where we were funding sort of across and everywhere and without a ton of strategy. And our board felt like, given the opportunity and achievement gaps in our community, they felt like they wanted to be much more strategic about how we were investing and how we were having an impact in the district. So they initiated a rewrite of our mission. So we exist to champion equitable education for students, families, and the community. And we do that through our various programs. So the first thing I was going to maybe address is well, I guess I shared with you all one of the areas of overlap, and this goes back to our fiscal sponsorship role. And actually, I can probably show you all of a short list of the different fiscal sponsorship programs. There we go. So we hold all of these different funds, and we actually hold a lot more than this, but these are the ones that members of the public can give to these particular funds. So you might have given to one of these funds, and we essentially hold that money. Before the pandemic, PTA started to ask the Berkeley Public Schools Fund to hold what you all were calling emergency family fund money. And it was largely because some district families were experiencing emergencies, and PTAs, I guess by law, cannot give PTA funds to a specific family, right? And we can, because we have a different kind of charter and organization. So we would hold your emergency family money, and then largely those funds were administered through the Office of Family Engagement and Equity, the OFE team. So they would work usually with the family directly, sometimes with the principal, and tap into those funds. We created a process, and this was the same process during COVID. We actually pivoted and put all of our grant funding into emergency family support for about 1.5 years. And we worked very, very closely with the OFE team to essentially just be their back office. So we had grown in having, we had 14 different funds for 14 different schools in the district. And there was some conversation from the OFE team. They said, we would like to, they were struggling with the fact that different OFE specialists interpreted family emergencies differently. And so that caused, discrepancies in how their practices played out. So they were really interested in aligning their practice as a whole team, creating some definitions, creating a single process. So they came to us and said, we want to standardize, and we had just gone through an audit and we were under some pressure to have fewer separate funds. And meanwhile, we worked with the head of the principals union, Alex Hunt, over at Malcolm X, as our principal voice. And we had a bunch of meetings to think about how we might create a single fund that would support all of our schools. And one of the sticking points is that we'd had a couple of schools that don't have fundraising PTAs. You probably know the BTA and the preschools do not have fundraising PTAs, so they never had access to a fund like this. So in trying to take a more equitable approach to essentially doing the same thing, but hopefully better and more sort of centralized, and being more inclusive of those two sites, we co-created a single fund. We created contribution ranges for each school based on a number of factors. And then we deducted what was already in schools' existing funds. So anyway, that is what happened. We presented that to the principals last spring, and it is rolling out this year. It's kind of our pilot year. We're going to see how it's going. So I know many of your team members were involved in sending over a check, your annual contribution to that. So thank you for that. Okay, so that's fiscal sponsors. And Rita, if there's anything in the chat, I can't see that and do this, so please let me know if there's anything there. Okay, so then we are grant makers. We've been doing this for a long time. We give grants in these categories, these 6 categories. So academic intervention and support, health and wellness, digital equity, culturally linguistically responsive, relevant learning, which often includes positive racial identity development. That's a lot of affinity groups. Equitable family engagement. So trying to bring all the families into the life and the heart of the school, especially the families who are not already engaged. And we're also working on the teacher pipeline, both recruiting, but as we actually we had our board meeting tonight and the superintendent came to speak and she said, recruiting goes well, it's the retention of, especially of our staff of color that we're struggling with. So we're trying to support in that realm as well. We have 2 different pathways, leading for equity grants and learning for equity grants. They're mostly distinguished in size. So the leading for equity grants are designed to be district-wide projects, and we award up to $25,000. And all of our grants are team grants. So we think that in trying to make change, you need to have a whole bunch of people on board and you have to know how to work as a team. We used to give individual teacher grants, and what we heard year in, year out was that the outcome of that was that individual super motivated teachers would do the most incredible stuff in their classroom. But if your kid was not lucky enough to be in that 3rd grade class and they were in the 3rd grade class next door, that they wouldn't get access to any of that. So we are pushing teachers to find projects where they can collaborate as a team and move forward together. And then we have our learning for equity grants. These are smaller and these are school specific grants. We have collaborated with PTAs in the past when they are part of a team. We definitely need to have a BUSD staff member as the project lead so that they're holding the work and making sure it's integrated into the life of the school. But we've had PTA involvement in a couple of different ways, including grant writers, including partners in the project. So same funding areas. So that's our grant making. We give grants out once a year, so we fund them the spring ahead of time. So we open up our application in the early winter, like right after winter break. Folks have a couple of months to apply, and we award grants in May every year. Funds become available at the new fiscal year, which for us is July 1, which is the same as the district, and then they have the school year to spend. We hear a lot from our grantees that they really appreciate getting funds from the schools fund because we are quick. We're a small and nimble team, so we can turn around requests really quickly, and we make sure people get paid. So anyway, that is our grant making. And then I wanted to spend just a moment talking about Berkeley Schools Volunteers. So this was our second program developed over 30 years ago. Again, the district came to us and said, we would like you to help us coordinate this sort of district-wide. And one of the questions that we often get from PTAs is, well, I'm a parent and I've been volunteering in my kid's class. How come I don't know about you? And exactly, because the California Ed Code specifically gives parents a right to volunteer in their own child's class. Of course, at the discretion of the teacher, your teacher needs to be on board with you being in the classroom, but you don't have to, for example, go get fingerprinted to do that. You don't have to go through a liaison organization like we are. But for anyone else, let's say an auntie or a grandparent or your neighbor next door, for anyone else who wants to volunteer in Berkeley Unified, the Ed Code says that they do need to go through some sort of organization, and the district has nominated us to do that work. So we recruit and we screen and we orient and train, and then we individually match community volunteers. This could be college students, it could be parents, it could be retirees, and hundreds of them every year. And we place them everywhere from the preschool all the way up to the Berkeley Adult School. It's a very customized program. So volunteers can say, I'm really good at X or Y, and teachers can come to us and they say, I need a volunteer on Tuesday afternoons who can do this thing. And we swim in all of these hundreds of requests and we make them match, and then we keep tabs on the partnerships throughout the year. So that's our Classroom Volunteers program, and I should differentiate, that's Classroom Volunteers. And there's information, you know, who are they and what does it look like? How do we sign up? And so again, I will say parents don't have to go through us. I will say, if you go through us, then you get access to a whole smattering of trainings for volunteers. And a lot of times it's the district coaches, the math coaches, the literacy coaches, the social emotional learning coaches who are coming and doing trainings for our volunteer community. So we highly encourage you to consider joining BSV, get a cute little name badge so that you look official when you volunteer. But it's definitely not required for parents. During the pandemic, we had just started another community of volunteers called our School Support Volunteers, in recognition of the fact that not everyone can give at least an hour a week throughout the school year, which is our threshold for classroom volunteers. We have a lot of folks who are like, I want to support the schools, but I only have, you know, time here or there, and definitely not this month. So we created this pathway whereby different projects come to us. These are different from what PTAs do because you all are usually focused on your school site. The projects that we support are typically district-wide. And we're doing right now a lot of work around food security and have a long-standing partnership with the Berkeley Food Network. So again, district-wide is a distinction between school volunteers. And these particular volunteers essentially sign up to be on an email list, and they get emailed every few weeks with a list of projects, and they can sign up at will. Like, oh, I have time now, I can sign up for this shift, or they can ignore it for the next 8 months. It's totally up to them. So we have those two volunteer pathways. I think I will just close in saying our various programs are largely behind the scenes. Grant making, we support the teachers doing their work. Volunteers, we place the volunteers, but they're on the front lines. Fiscal sponsorship, definitely behind the scenes. Oh, you know what? I didn't talk about our STEM programs. I will mention those briefly. We essentially got a big gift from a local corporation that was interested in STEM education in particular, and really trying to address the opportunity gaps in the STEM field at large and how that starts very young. If you all don't know about the Career Technical Education Program at Berkeley High, sometimes called CTE, I want to sing its praises. It's one of the best kept secrets in Berkeley Unified. It's incredible. There are 14 different career connected pathways at Berkeley High for all kinds of, with sort of industry grade, state of the art equipment and teachers straight from industry in the schools. What we're noticing at Berkeley High is that a lot of the demographics of the kids who were entering those programs were pretty predictable, and we're definitely not reaching the full breadth of our student body. So we worked with them to backwards map from the high school to create a middle school summer camp, 4 weeks of free summer camp. And we backwards mapped from there to create a Saturday school at the elementary level, really designed for those groups of students who are not yet seen in the STEM field. So that includes students of color, low-income students, English learners, girls, and gender expansive youth. Those are all groups that we largely don't see in STEM. So we've created this pipeline in partnership with the district and in partnership with some of our funding sponsors to create these STEM programs. So you might hear about Super Science Saturdays or Maker Camp, and that is what this is all about. So anyway, that is that. I think I will stop sharing my screen and pause there and see if anyone has any questions.
And just as a tip for folks, if you go to the Heart React button, that's where you raise your hand. Bottom of our screen. Jeffy, we had last month, we were on a different platform, so we're all kind of getting.
Yes, we just got moved from Zoom to Google Meet, so we're also kind of spinning ourselves. Get it?
Yeah, someone loaned us Zoom again this month. Thank you so much for walking us through all of that. Your program is something that, or Berkeley Public Schools Fund is something that I had really limited information about, so I appreciate all of that. Folks, do any people have comments or questions here? You know, I think the concept of a more general OFI funding was something that we had actually had conversations about a couple of years ago. And now here we are, and it's come at us from a different direction. So do people want to have more conversation around this? And
I just wanted to cheer it on. It's a really great resource. I've done some grant writing and volunteering, and I feel like the program is really transformational, but like you said, we just don't know enough about it. So even if this council can help spread the word in some way, I think that that would be a great start.
So. Oh, there's one, I think I was halfway through a thought. I was saying that we do a lot of behind the scenes work and sort of capacity building. And because we are often behind the scenes, I'm not surprised to hear from Rita saying she didn't quite know exactly who we were and what we do. So we are trying to do a lot of storytelling right now, capturing the impact of all of these different programs and writing them up. And we might send some of those stories that might pertain to your school to your PTA newsletter people. For example, like we did this beautiful volunteer spotlight last year around a Thousand Oaks volunteer, and we sent it to the Thousand Oaks, PTA, and they put it in their newsletter, and it's we have these gorgeous photos, and so we're trying to do that storytelling, and it also helps us be more visible because we are largely funded by small donations from the community. It is the Berkeley community that has kept us afloat. We are not really eligible for grants, being sandwiched between Oakland and West Contra Costa. It's a tougher sell to get grant funding in Berkeley. So it's largely community members who support us and have for a long time. And I would also just add that I think parents, having been a parent go through, when I was an elementary school parent, my whole world was my kids' elementary school. But once I made the jump into middle school, I started to look around and be like, oh, I'm part of a district and there's district politics at work and there's difference, like my world got a little bit bigger. And I also know that PTA involvement drops off pretty significantly in middle schools. So anyway, I think we're a great fit for parents once they're sort of exiting the womb of elementary school PTAs and they're ready to kind of embrace a larger district identity. We would love to engage folks, and we really do appreciate any help you can give us to make our behind the scenes work more visible to the.
Well, everyone, if you don't have more for Duffy tonight, then we will say thank you so much for coming and look forward to seeing some of those spotlights in our school newsletters. and we really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and so Di, we have a couple other people who wanted to come and talk about and introduce a couple other things, right? There was a measure on our next ballot.
Yes, we have two we wanted for information. It was Measure Z, the soda tax, and Measure FF, the Berkeley Safe Streets. I see Ben,
Cool.
hi, you've turned on your camera.
Yeah. I don't know if I can go first or Measure Z, either one. I've got time, but I don't know what you want.
No, that's great. If you can offer, information about what this measure is to inform folks, definitely.
Sure, absolutely. So I think I had 10 minutes, right? I've got a little presentation here I can go through if I can, let's see.
I think you can share screen.
Yeah, can y'all see that now?
Yep.
Perfect, great. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Ben Gould. I'm here with the Berkeley Safe Streets Yes on FF campaign. Our campaign manager, Rebecca Mervish, also is in the call in case we have any additional questions you can help answer too. I just want to say a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Berkeley. I went to Berkeley High, Cragmont Elementary School, and King Middle School as well. Lived in Berkeley almost my entire life, aside for a couple of stints in college, and then also I now recently got to move to Oakland. Measure FF is a citizens initiative. We organized and wrote this measure last summer and into the fall. We gathered over 4,000 signatures. We have something like between 100, 200 volunteers all across the city, all ages, all backgrounds. It's a very grassroots campaign. We're looking to help fix the streets, make them smoother, and make them safer for everyone who wants to walk, bike, take transit, or drive in Berkeley. Measure FF is a parcel tax for street and sidewalk repair, safety improvements, and environmental enhancements. The measure would invest over $100 million to fix our streets and sidewalks. It provides over $50 million in addition for safety improvements like the Safe Routes to Schools projects that we know have been languishing for far too long. It also helps build climate resiliency with additional funds for street trees, stormwater infrastructure, and other community benefits for our streets. Really, the goal that we had with this measure is to make Berkeley safe, easy, and fun to get around, regardless of age, mobility, or mode choice. This is really trying to be a comprehensive, let's make the streets better for everyone, and while we're doing it, we'll make them safer and more accessible and more environmentally friendly. So why yes on FF? There's independent staff analysis done earlier this summer, nonpartisan, just city staff looking at what the outcomes of the measure would be. They found that a Measure FF is the only proposed measure expected to maintain or improve Berkeley streets. There is a competing measure. Another group of activists wanted to see a lower tax rate, fewer safety improvements. So they have their own measure, that's Measure EE. You can see from this chart, this orange, the lowest line there is what is going to happen if nothing passes. Probably not what's going to happen, right? But that's if city funding is maintained as currently, we're going to see our street quality go from 57 down to 52, which is it's already not good. We all know that 52 is getting worse. We don't want to go in that direction. Under the competing measure, Measure EE, it'll be not quite as bad, 54, but it's still a significant decrease. Under Measure FF, we'll be at 57 after 12 years. Measure FF actually goes for 14 years, 2 additional years beyond this chart. So looking at the trajectory, it looks like it's heading upwards, at least to us. So we think that it's likely to have a chance to improve Berkeley streets in terms of the overall street quality. That's just the physical integrity of the streets, fewer cracks, fewer potholes. But also we're going to add a lot of other safety improvements as well as part of the idea. We provide actually more than double the funding for these key categories of street paving, safety improvements, and other environmental enhancements as the competing measure. But we only cost homeowners about $1 more per week, a little over $1 more per week. That's because we actually have a split roll rate similar to the library tax, where non-residential properties pay a higher rate than residential ones. We think that's fair because businesses have big trucks, they damage the streets more, so they can pay a little extra. But you can see that Measure FF has twice as much money for street paving, 80 million versus 40 million, $50 million for safety improvements versus less than 20 for Measure EE, about 20 million in environmental enhancements. That's the street trees, the green infrastructure, stormwater management kind of stuff I was mentioning. And then sidewalks, the two are pretty similar. We have about 30 million, they have about 35, a little slight difference there. But we're really focusing on the streets paved and making them safer for everyone. So who supports Measure FF? We have endorsements from huge, long list of everyone you can think of, just about. Berkeley Firefighters Association, the Federation of Teachers, Sierra Club, League of Women Voters, Democratic Party. Our city auditor, Jenny Wong, supports Measure FF because she says we have the strongest accountability and oversight measure features of any streets measure on the ballot. Assembly member Buffy Wicks, a supermajority of city council, every elected member of the Berkeley School Board, Alameda County Democratic Party, labor unions, building trades, Labor Council, United Auto Workers, and a bunch of retired council members. So I really want to talk about the safety improvements for a little bit as well. We know that there's been some conflict in Berkeley around things like the Hopkins Street project, which would have added bike lanes in a very special area of Hopkins, and that was a lot of contention, and the process wasn't done very well, and there's concern from the firefighters. We're not trying to relitigate that. We don't want to go back to Hopkins. That's not what our fight is about, really. We think that the city, which we know the city has a lot of plans. We have a Vision Zero plan, a pedestrian plan, a bicycle plan. We have all these safe routes to schools projects. And right now, they're all languishing all across the city. And we see just last month, this baby trying to cross the street was struck by a driver and sent to the hospital. Last year, a child going trick-or-treating was struck by a reckless driver in a neighborhood street, and almost, came very close. We've seen people, struck and killed on Marin up in the hills. We've seen people biking on Sacramento who've been doored by cars. All over our city, we know we have these critical safety issues. And for parents especially, this is why I imagine a lot of you don't necessarily feel safe and comfortable having your kids walk or bike to school. And so our view is that we really want to make sure that Berkeley has the resources available to help implement these plans to the extent needed to help people feel safe walking and biking in our city, so we can reduce our reliance on automobiles, we can reduce our reliance on parents being available for school pickup and school drop-off, and we can help people have more freedom. Because when I was a teenager in Berkeley, going to Berkeley High School, I wanted to be able to go hang out with my friends after school, and not worry about my parents picking me up and dropping me off, but it wasn't necessarily easy or accessible for me to do that. So it's really about increasing accessibility and opportunity for every Berkeley resident of all ages, whether they're 8 years old or 80 years old, trying to make sure that our community can work for everyone. I see a couple of things in the chat here, some questions. I will go see, thank you for those questions. I'll go over those in a moment when I get to the questions section. So how can the PTA Council help? Well, I'm really excited to share that actually just yesterday, we got an email saying we have a very generous donor willing to match up to $15,000 in contributions. And so we actually are looking for support and contributions. PTA Council has helped donate to other measures in the past. We saw you donated to, I think, the BSEP funding in March earlier this year, or maybe some of the individual PTAs. C3s can support ballot measures. So you guys can endorse and donate. If you guys can share this with other PTAs, I see a lot of presidents from different PTAs here. So share with your PTAs, share with your parent networks, help us meet our grassroots fundraising goal for $15,000. Additionally, if you can help us individually, if you want to endorse and donate or sign up for a lawn sign, you can go to our website at www.yesonff.com. Okay, I'll go ahead and take some of these questions now that I saw in the audience here. Why don't we already have a budget for this sort of thing? Isn't this what a city normally does? So it's a great question. So Berkeley has unfortunately underfunded our roads for decades. The city council has sort of let them languish in favor of funding other short-term priorities. And then in 2020, 2021, city auditor released a report saying, we're heading off a cliff. It's going to get a lot worse if we don't invest. So city council has actually doubled funding for street paving in recent years. But unfortunately, we're sort of headed off that cliff even so. With Measure L failing in 2022, we've seen costs for paving go up significantly. So the city is putting in nearly $20 million a year into street paving already. It's just not enough to fix or maintain our streets, unfortunately, with rising costs and degrading roads. So we clearly need a ballot measure. Measure FF, we worked very hard to do a compromise measure that would be the best sort of cohesive, widely supported measure we could get together. It's not as much money as we hoped it would be, and it's not as big an impact as we hoped it would be initially, but it is the best one we can come up with. And it looks like it's good enough to hold us over, keep things steady. And we also think that as Berkeley, adds more housing, adds more jobs in West Berkeley, and more development, because it's a parcel tax, more buildings means more revenue. So the city can grow this revenue over time to help further fund street paving. There's also matching grants available from the state and federal governments that Measure FF can help to unlock. So our hope is that it'll be leveraged effectively for a much bigger impact, but we do need to measure the city's decades in the hole. It's going to take us a while to get out of, so we're working towards that. Is there any consideration for underserved neighborhoods in the city? Yes, there absolutely is. So Berkeley actually just recently adopted what's called an equity priority zone for paving projects. So they do prioritize street repair in the historically disenfranchised communities of Berkeley, South and West Berkeley. It's a whole zone they've drawn out. So Measure FF follows the city's plans and will support the equity priority zone to prioritize paving in those areas. That's also where a lot of the most dangerous streets are. We have a high injury network, it's called in Berkeley, where they look at the streets people are injured on. It's like 80% of injuries are on 20% of streets, something like that. And so those are also part of the focus for Berkeley's city plans, like the Vision Zero plan, pedestrian plan. For project prioritization, we have a public input process. So there's workshops held throughout the city every few years, sort of like Measure T1, to get public input on priorities. And then the city council, city staff, city commissions take additional input in their own meetings and figure out the prioritization. Measure FF requires that the projects it funds are consistent with adopted city plans. So we're not looking at doing anything new, creative that hasn't already been discussed and said we should do this. We're just saying, okay, here's all of our plans. Let's figure out what the key projects in these plans are and implement those.
We've got, since
yeah,
Taesung's a bunch of questions, Kelly just put one in and we can go back up to Taesung's.
Yeah, of course.
Is there consideration that the folks from EE and the folks from FF combine and put a tiered plan on offer rather than confuse voters with two different measures at the same time?
Yeah, we spent months working with the EE folks trying to find a compromise approach, and we worked really hard to bring our measure towards where they wanted, but they wanted a lot of things cut from our measure we weren't comfortable with cutting. They wanted the safety funding cut down dramatically. They wanted it tightly restricted, and we just weren't willing to give up safe routes to schools, improvements for firefighters and ambulances to arrive faster, or the level of funding that we see is necessary to put in projects across the city of Berkeley, right? They had those are the main issues, mostly around safety funding was my experience, right? There's some other minor differences, a little bit about oversight, but that was just sort of something we didn't get to because these discussions about funding levels and the tax levels they wanted to lower. We tried going as low as we could. You can see already it's barely enough to keep the streets afloat, and they wanted to still lower tax rates. That was sort of the sticking points we couldn't get through with them.
Now, when you were going through your slides, I think you did say something about oversight.
Yes.
But so that was one of Taesung's other points was what systems are in place to ensure that the funds are spent.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a triple oversight approach. We have first the city manager providing annual reports on project spending, progress, impacts, miles paved, when streets are planning to get paved, what the impacts on mode shift, like are people biking and walking more, that kind of stuff. We also have an independent city commission that will do oversight of how funds have been spent. We have both 3 members appointed by existing commissions from the Transportation and the Environmental Commission. And then we have also 4 people appointed by City Council with expertise and background in these areas of oversight, public works, budget, fiscal management, that kind of thing. I'm sure all of you know on PTA councils, you need to have some idea of what you're looking at in order to handle dealing with a budget, dealing with a project report, progress report, that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we have effective oversight that way. And the third piece of the oversight branch is a city auditor. Most measures say they'll have an independent audit done separately, and the city council never really gets around to it. We actually said we'll fund the city auditor to do the audits herself. That way, city council has no say or control over it. City auditor will get it done, and we'll have really good reports because we know the city auditor does an amazing job. So that's the oversight approach we have.
I really appreciate you coming here and presenting and taking our questions. And I also want to recognize that we have 2 people here for Soda Tax as well.
Of course.
And so thank you so much. And I think people will know how to reach out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, on ff.com for any. Oh, yeah.
The PowerPoint, I can send that out. Thank you.
I'll send it to you. Actually, I'll just drop it in the chat here if that's okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much.
And I think we have Janice and maybe Rachel as well.
Yeah, it looks like Raquel couldn't join, so I'm gonna have to wing it a little bit, but I can try to make this short. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I am a parent at Rosa Parks and at King, and I'm also a proud BUSD alum. I went to Oxford, Longfellow, King, and Berkeley High myself. I'm volunteering on the Measure Z campaign, which is basically a renewal of the soda tax. So it's the exact same measure that was passed back in, I want to say 2016, but there was an expiration clause built into that initial one. And this is basically a renewal with the removal of that sunset clause. The soda tax funds about half of BUSD's garden program. So it's a really important source of funding. And it also funds a number of other important nutrition education and health promotion programs around the city, including Berkeley's 2 Head Start sites, Healthy Black Families, Berkeley Youth Alternatives. There's a number of different organizations. And how that funding gets distributed is similar to what Ben was just describing. There's a citizen-led commission that actually puts out a request for proposal to different nonprofits. And then I'm saying we because I'm actually also a commissioner, but I'm here today as a private citizen and not representing the commission. But the commission reviews those different proposals and then makes sure that the funding goes to these different programs that are serving communities that are disproportionately targeted by the soda industry. So I think that's sort of like, the big overview of why the tax is super important. And I'm not, from all of the flyering that I've done, it's not so much that we're facing opposition this time around, like last time when Big Soda did spend a lot of money to do some opposition campaigning in Berkeley, but we are facing more of like an awareness battle. I think it's just seems like a lot of people either don't know that so much of the garden funding comes from the soda tax and that it's on the ballot again this year. So my main ask for all of you is we were trying to figure out how to get something out to all of the different PTA trees, just so that people are aware, and then where that line is, like, can we actually put out a message that says vote yes on Measure Z, or does it need to be like purely informational? And
I've got
I'll-
a real quick question.
Mhm.
So, my understanding is the soda tax is working and people are buying less soda, which means less funding for the garden program. Is there any increase that could happen so that we could send more money to the garden program? Because they had to do some major garden program cuts this year.
Right.
Because people are not drinking as much soda, which is also good. And the only people who might not like are dentists.
So the funding, it did dip during the pandemic. The revenues actually seem to be like up a little bit again this year. Not a lot. I think overall the tax is working and we are seeing fewer revenues. And so there was some discussion, and I'm not on the group that was trying to figure out, how to craft the resolution. I think there was some discussion about doing like a 2 cent per ounce instead of 1 cent per ounce tax. And I'm not sure how they ultimately decided on the 1 cent, but maybe that is something that can be reviewed again in the future. Good question.
Vicky, I think you're up next.
Yeah, I had the same question because our garden program wasn't fully funded and I was sitting on SBAC when we had to cut their funds. So how many years is this current resolution for?
The current one on the ballot for November, or the one currently in place?
The one for November.
For Measure Z, it would be, as far as I know, forever. They took out the expiration piece.
Okay, so, but if it's already on the ballot, does that mean it's too late to change how the funding stream happens, or whether or not the funding can be increased for the garden, or what other things it's funding, so that I don't know how it's proportioned, if it's like a percentage of it goes to garden or if it's a fixed amount, or how that works?
That's a good question. I'll have to ask about that some more. Right now, and as far as I know, in the past, I'm a relatively new commissioner, so I don't totally know the whole history. About half has always gone to BUSD. So maybe that proportion can be changed in the future. I know
Well,
that
and the future would be now, if there's not going to be another soda tax, if there's no expiration date. So I would say that there's a bit of urgency, because if it passes and this is the new soda tax, it's not like it's coming up for renewal in 4 years. So
right. I think it can be potentially amended, or you could introduce
okay.
a different type. This is a distributor tax. So the tax goes to the companies that are distributing soda in Berkeley.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
maybe there are some other
Not
ways.
the stores that are selling it.
Right. And then from my conversations with, he calls himself Farmer Ben, he's, the district
Yep.
lead in the gardening program. Part of the big funding issue last year was they didn't get a big grant that they've always relied on that actually pays for a lot of the instruction. So I think some maybe grant writing assistance could be really helpful too. But yes, anyway, I think I do feel like that's like sort of a bigger conversation of why, the stability of the garden funding, which is just such a jewel in BUSD.
Yeah, and then I'll also just answer your question. PTAs are allowed to endorse measures through our e-trees, and you could send something to Rita that she could then send to all of the PTA presidents to send to our e-trees, just to put that out, assuming that. But it would be at the school site level if we decide to endorse it or not as a school before we send it out, but certainly we could do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So maybe
I think because there's such a clear resolution on the California PTA website about sugary soda, that is an exception. Like, I wouldn't want us to get in the mire about other stuff where there's not such a clear path forward of defendability for making a stance.
Right. That makes sense. I think I probably should have put this in the chat earlier. A lot of people have dropped off, but that is the Measure Z website.
we can send that out with our notes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lindsay, you put in the chat, and I hate to go on to our next thing, but our last thing here is coming up on October 1st. Lindsay, you put in the chat the information about the League of Women Voters Berkeley School Board Candidate Forum. So that is, I think, one of our last items that we really wanted to get to tonight. And I realize again that people are having to leave. But I just wanted to highlight that. Lindsay, did you want to say anything else about that before?
Just that this is a neutral forum. The PTA will not take a stance on who to endorse or to talk about. Everybody can make their own individual decisions as people. And that is the stance of the California PTA. So we are here as information bringers and amplifiers of information. And that's how the PTA operates.
I think it's great that we're having this again. It does directly conflict with the district orientation that also invites Berkeley PTA, P&O, DSHEC, and all the other committees. They're doing their orientation that night to do the kickoff of district committees. So a lot of people won't be able to attend that. I wonder if that means that the candidates who are also school board members won't be able to be there if they're supposed to be at the training. I don't know.
Yeah.
Usually they don't come to the training,
Okay.
so it should be fine. And
Yeah.
I mean, one or the other will be recorded, I'm sure.
Okay.
We can do time check. It's 9:05. Thanks everyone for hanging out a few minutes after. Rita, do you want to jam down? I don't know.
Yeah, what else can we clear here? Vicky, you had an update on the superintendent's disability.
Yeah, I just had a quick update. I sent an email out to everybody that I hope people got with our announcement. But we are launching the Disability Equity Special Education Advisory Committee or Superintendent's Advisory Committee. And that will be part of the October 1st launch, but we're doing a webinar on the 17th, which was in the date that I sent. And there's an interest form that people can fill out. But we're hoping to get an official self-nomination form. The 17th is really just like a webinar to give people the history of how this new committee came about, tell people about SPED. We want to be all inclusive and not siloed in just the SPED world. So we're being expansive and looking at RTI, 504s, the whole thing. So there'll be both student services and SPED representation on the committee. And this would be a district committee that then also has a spot at the board and for our committee speaking and as well as on the SBAC as well. And we're hoping to get at least one rep from every site. And we're hoping to help sites form their own inclusion committees. So it's a similar relationship like the GSHEC and the LGBT clubs or the ELAC and DLAC. At Malcolm X, we have inclusion families, and then this is the district level. So we're hoping that schools who don't have an inclusion family type group, that this first launch year would help create one. And then that group at each school site would help lift up their representative to this committee. And there's a two-way conversation there. So please post on your eTrees. And this is a save the date. When we have a Zoom link closer to like maybe a week before, I'll send another message out to our eTree so you guys can then post that.
Okay. Last bits here. Di, is there anything else we need to make sure to talk about tonight? I mean, I can just say, I did log in for some of the 2x2 meeting on Friday.
I think we can table that, the parking.
Yeah, the parking stuff.
Yes, definitely. I think the about PTA funds and the district owing money, we sent that out.
I sent that out, yeah.
Great. So if folks, if they want to report back in our listserv of how you're able to get money, because I know that's been an issue in the past, going back and forth with Harvey and your principals talking about getting the check back, but there's some sizable money out there. So, and there's a 30-day window for you to respond. So definitely if sites can just jump on that and just report out your experience, I think it'd be helpful for everybody.
And if we owe money, when are we supposed to?
Take your time. I don't know.
He didn't say.
Yeah, you'd have to go back in that email, but probably, yeah.
Okay.
October, yeah.
Are we voting on the treasurer?
We did that last time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
A plug for next month. Next month, we have our superintendent coming to talk. And so, we'll be devoting a chunk of our time for that. And I'll be sending the week before, we'll be trying to send around to collect questions as well.
Great. I do want to end last time. I didn't say a positive thank you to everyone. We said, let's keep our meetings positive, encourage each other. And I think I'm always amazed all the work everyone here does. So keep up the work. Take care of yourself. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Good night.